To have all of you here today. We are thrilled to play for you. First of all, I want to thank Kim for all of her help. She's been wonderful. And I think as you look at the program, you're going to notice that these tunes are very old. The thing that has been surprising to us as musicians and trying to put all of this together is that we discovered that some of these tunes are centuries old and we still listen to them today. They're still part of the music that we hear during the holidays. And so for all of the things that we play today, we have the original music, but we play it according to our arrangements for our instruments. As we go along, we'll talk to you about our instruments, and we will give you some information about some of the music as well. So let me just see if we need to tune for a minute. He's still out trying to turn off the, the car, so I apologize. We are looking at music from all parts of the world. You'll notice that we have ancient carols. They are from England, France, Spain. We added a whole section on Celtic music at the end. We have started doing lecture concerts as well. So we just did one last week on Celtic music and the history of the Celtic music. And so you're going to get to hear some Celtic carols at the end as well. This is Eric. And we will get ourselves started here. We're going to start with just a very, very quick little ancient Irish carol called Welcome, Welcome. So the next two pieces you'll notice, the King Wenceslas, and that is followed by Bring a Torch, Jeanette Isabella. Again, these are going to be our arrangements of these pieces, and we hope you enjoy. play with flute and mic. So thank you very much. That was it was so fun to put those together and kind of give it our own little spiel. You'll notice, I think, on the program that Eric used to play for the Mannheim Steamroller. And those of you who, I've never said this in public before, have I? You may notice that it sounded a little Mannheim Steamroller-ish, but that's reasons, right? So we're going to move on. These next pieces are ancient English pieces, and the first one, What Child Is This? Now, there's a long, long, long history behind that piece, and when we get to the end of the program, we're going to describe that history. But we will start with What Child Is This? And then we will go to the Coventry Carol. This is an arrangement, again, that we have put together for our program today. Should just stand up and talk, huh? So, Fanny Emanuel is a very old piece that we have heard, again, for centuries. We're going to start this little section of this set with Fanny Emanuel, and then Eric is going to play on his 8-course lute. He'll describe all of these to you in a little bit. Personette Hodie. I think you'll recognize it. Again, we hear all kinds of stuff in elevators and, and everywhere you go, department stores. These songs have been around for centuries. going to take a minute, and then we'll do, yeah. I'm going to take a minute and talk a little bit about my flutes first. You'll notice these don't look like what they play in orchestras today, right? This little flute right here is tricky. I think I'll do that. This is a Renaissance flute. It's not fun to play. Can I say that? But it is very indicative of music, probably 1400s, some early 1500s and so. The problem with the music is that it started getting complicated. And in the 1600s, you had to be able to play lots of flats and sharps and different keys and all of that. And this, in order to make those kinds of pitches, you had to play half of the whole. Oh, now think about that. And so they came up with a brilliant idea of adding a key. And so this flute was predominant in the 1700s. Bach handled all of the Baroque orchestras. They call this a one-key flute or a traverso, or it has many different types of names. And it also doesn't look like the modern flute, though, right? This one is made out of grenadille, which is an African hardwood. It's actually very heavy as flutes go, but it doesn't have the little keys and all that good stuff that you get on the modern flutes. Those came about 100 years later because orchestra music got to be very complicated, and these instruments couldn't play them either because they only had one key to help you, manage all of the sharps and flats. So I will be mostly playing the black flute today, but just play a little bit of the Renaissance flute at the beginning.
This is a lute. In the 16th and early 17th century, the lute was to European countries what the piano was in the 19th and early 20th century. It was the household instrument. You can see it's got a rounded body in the back, flat soundboard you write on, a neck that's attached by a nail that you can't see to a block inside, goes up here. Then we have the pink box at almost a right angle up here. Strings that pass through holes in the bridge down here, over the rose, which is carved right into the soundboard, passes over the fingerboard with frets, which are strips of gut tied around the neck. It's strung in pairs of strings. Each pair is called a course. This is an 8-course lute. So how many strings? Nope. I lied. One is single strum. The highest pitched chorus, called a chanterelle. Chanterelle, the singer, is only one string. Okay, thanks. I'll talk a little bit more about that big thing I played earlier as we go along.
All right, so we're going to move on to 3 different pieces here that are traditional tunes from Spain, France, and England. And you will recognize all of them, I think. These are the wonderful melodies that we hear throughout the season. And he's getting that big thing out here. So, don't think I can do harp and There we go. Okay, I'm going to switch to harp. Harps, as you know, are very, very old instruments. Some of them are back in, AD, BC. They are usually strung in steel. Sometimes they're strung in nylon nowadays. The really old harps were strung in gut. Neil will tell you how much fun that is.
How much?
But this harp is called a lever harp. You can see on the side here, it has these little levers. In about the 1600s again, the music started getting a little difficult to play for most of the instruments. They just didn't have the capability of playing the sharps and flats. And so we had a person who came up with the idea of, ooh, why don't we put hooks here and try to raise these pitches or lower them according to the key that we're playing here. And so that's what they did. It got a little bit better toward the end of the 1600s. And then somebody figured out how to make pedals. Uh-oh, this harp went away for a while because it was so much easier just to push your foot down and change the pitch of the string. And you still see pedal harps in orchestras today. That's what you see, and they're much, much bigger than this harp. This is called a Celtic harp or a lever harp, or sometimes it's just called a folk harp. So it's, I think for our purposes, as an early music group, this seems to be the most appropriate instrument for what we do. We're going to be playing a whole set of winter songs. We'll start with a little piece that was a Scottish piece in the early 17th century called Cold and Raw. We thought it kind of, yeah, that works, doesn't it? And then the next one after that is a very old piece. The composer, actually, they know when he died. They didn't know when he was born, but he died in 1240. So it is a very old piece. talk a little bit about, oh, you want to do arch flutes? Sure. Let's do that. Oh.
You remember the lute I played a few numbers ago. This is called an arch lute. It is like an archangel or an archenemy, depending on how it's going. They took off the bent back peg box. They put on an extra long neck extension on it with another peg box, set of pegs, and set of strings, so that you can play lower bass notes like this. So those obnoxious rumbles you heard earlier, that was me.
And me.
Yeah.
I did some obnoxious rumbles as well. So this instrument here, this is a bass viola da gamba. So what's interesting about this instrument, coming from a background of being a cellist, is everything. Everything about this instrument is interesting and was challenging for me. Trying to switch from cello, which is a member of the violin family, to the gamba, which is a member of its own family, right? The viol family. So these actually come in different sizes, right? This is the cello size bass viola da gamba. Notice it actually shares more similarities to Eric's instruments than it does the violin family. It is a fretted instrument, just like Eric's instruments. The frets are tied around the back, little pieces of gut string. Dee had mentioned the enjoyment of trying to maintain tuning with a wooden instrument where the strings are made of the intestines of some animal, right? That's what a gut string is. It was a time where nothing went to waste. So what can we do with the intestines? Well, we can turn them into strings. So they are very temperamental. That's why I tend to do a lot of tuning. The lower strings, this instrument is fitted with a seventh low A. So when the gamba first came around in the 1500s, there were typically 5 strings. As you sort of approached the Baroque, a 6th string was going to be added sort of as things shifted to try and emphasize a little bit more of the lower range, hence Eric's instrument, what they did with the lute to the arch lute, right? Things became a little bit more interesting at the lower end. So why not attach additional low strings to help support ensembles? What it also did is it allowed this instrument to become sort of change roles from an instrument that was largely supportive, supporting ensembles where it's flute, or it could be a vocalist, or even a violin, to an instrument that actually sort of started to get its own solo repertoire, right? And ultimately, what happened is that this was not the standard necessarily household instrument unless your house was the Palace of Versailles. You're more likely to find a lute. This was, sort of for the more, upper aristocrats would have what they would call a chest of viols, and it would be essentially an ensemble of varying sizes of this instrument, so people can get together. Really quickly before we move on, how I'm treating this instrument is very unusual in some of the pieces we play, right? This is a bowed instrument. There were plenty of lutes around, so the plucked instruments were covered. This instrument was intended to be bowed. However, given that the instrument's similarities to Eric's, it serves wonderfully as a plucked instrument. So I do pizzicato, as we say, the strings quite often to help support sort of this plucked sound that we like so much.
So this next set of tunes is by a Scottish composer, James Oswald. And Oswald was a contemporary of Bach and Handel, Telemann, all the Baroque composers. But nobody's ever heard of him. He ended up being a court composer in England for George III. You'll remember George was the king when the Americas split with the British, right? This piece is part of a group of pieces called the Seasons. Now, Vivaldi and others wrote pieces about the seasons, right? So we picked winter. That was kind of obvious. And the way I like to think about this piece, at least when I'm playing, it kind of helps me to think of a story. So here's my story. You can follow the story if you want, or you can make up your own story. But it starts out with a Siciliano, which is kind of a rocking, slow piece. And I'm thinking that's kind of getting up in the morning, having your coffee, eating a little donut, reading the paper, and then, you look at the papers, we're having a snowstorm. And it's going to be a big one. So the next part is a much faster little allegretto. And that piece is where we're running off to the store, getting all our supplies, because we're going to be stuck inside for a while. Right. And then after that, there's a little calm before the storm. And it's just a very short little, like 2-part piece, very short, that is just, you know how you know it's coming, but there's like no wind, and it's just sitting there, you know, oh, this is not gonna be good. And right after that comes the snowstorm. You'll know when we get to the snowstorm, trust me. Now this snowstorm will come in like a lion, and it'll kind of go away. You know how they do. And then they come back, and then it kind of tiptoes out. Then when it tiptoes out, it's dark outside. So we're sitting by the fire, and the Municipal, which is the second to the last movement, is a very beautiful, romantic piece, and you can just kind of relax and think about something that makes you very happy. And then we have the gamba. So here's the gamba for me. You know how when you have a snowstorm, you have to go clean out the snow? That's Eric out with a snow blower. And the gamba is a dance. I'm the one that's dancing. Well, we're going to start into our ancient Celtic carols now. This is just my favorite part. We're going to start with a piece that is 14th century Irish, so 1300s. They've been collecting these pieces for a very long time. The wassail melody is Cornish, and then I'll switch to harp and we'll do some Irish and Scottish pieces. We're going to give you a little extra added bonus in too, and add a little cheese. So in the 1700s, Ireland, for any of you who know, had been invaded and invaded and invaded for centuries and centuries. And we got to the 1700s, and many of the harpers, they call them harpers, not harpists,
then were dying. Some of them were 90, 100 years old, and they had been handing down this music, this Irish music, for centuries. But with all of these invasions, they were really afraid that they were going to lose their culture, and they were having their harps were being destroyed, and they were forcing the musicians to leave. They wanted to eradicate the culture. So in 1796, they called together a group of harpers. It was in Belfast, and they appointed a 19-year-old young man to come and go all over the country. Many of the harpers came to Belfast at that time, and he wrote down all of these tunes. It was incredible, and we have the collection of them. Many of these tunes that we're going to play for you in this section are from that time and from his hand, of listening to those old harpers and writing down their music.
These next two pieces, Suantra, now Magdine, is the Virgin Soul line. This is a traditional Irish piece. We are doing an arrangement of our arrangement. Well, we are arranging an arrangement of this piece, and we think it's just really hauntingly beautiful. And we'll follow that with a Scottish piece that
You should.
kind of rocks.
Yeah.
was very young. Boy, I was over at my grandmother's house. That's my mother's mother. And I was looking for something in a closet and saw a black case up on the shelf. So I took it down and opened it up, and that was inside. I found out later from my mother that mandolin, well, it was built in Milwaukee in the 1920s by a man named Stahl. And the man who had become my grandfather gave it to what would become my grandmother when they were courting. My mother also told me that grandma was a flapper.
We're not courting anymore, but I have played it.
Well, we are going to wrap up with one last piece. But before we do, I'd like to thank Kim Valentine and the Circle of Friends for taking such good care of us and arranging for all of this. We had a great time. We love playing for you. Thanks so much. One more thing. If you enjoy our music and you want to hear it when we're not around to play it for you, we have a CD called Twas in Wintertime, and there's some copies on hand. Special concert price, $10 cash. So that's all for that. This last piece, I think Dee wants to tell you about it.
So I promised at the very beginning of our program that I would tell you about the song Green Sleeves. Green Sleeves actually was registered in Bristol, England, in 1580. It was a song long before that they finally registered it as this song. About 100 years after that, a British insurance salesman decided to change the words. And the words were, "The old year now away is fled." Interestingly, we don't really know about that song, but it is to the tune of Green Sleeves. And then about 200 years after that, What Child Is This came about. So yeah, so the tune itself has been around long before What Child Is This. And this piece that we're going to end our program today, The Old Year Now Away Is Fled, was actually closer in time to the tune of Green Sleeves. The lyrics are on your program on the back, and you can kind of follow along. Neil and I will be speaking some of the lyrics as we go along, and we hope you enjoy. Thank you so much.